Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. If you've watched the channel for any length of time, you will know that despite enjoying all types of gaming genres, I tend to focus heavily on fantasy and science fiction. Well, today we are breaking that trend and we are going to look at some lovely hard plastic figures from the excellent Perry miniatures. In particular, we are looking at the Mercenaries box comprising European infantry dating from 1450 to 1500. For those who don't know, Perry Miniatures is a company established by the Perry twins, Alan and Michael, incredible miniature sculptors who worked for Games Workshop for decades. Their fingerprints are all over a lot of what Games Workshop did, especially the Lord of the Rings product range. They even got themselves a sweet little cameo in Peter Jackson's The Return of the King. This box of European infantry comprises sprues that date back to 2009 and 2010. And the reason I picked it up is because I was recently contacted by a company that wanted me to review their 15th century miniature skirmish game, Force of Virtue. I thought the game looked really interesting, but it's miniatures agnostic and I didn't have anything suitable to use. Well, actually that's not strictly true. I could have run the game with henchmen from Advanced Hero Quest or even the mercenaries from Hero Quest, but if I'm going to showcase a game on the channel, I want to showcase it right. I like to at least pretend I'm professional. So I grabbed this box of Mercs from Element Games. It cost me less than £20 and it includes 40 miniatures. That is a great bargain, coming in at under 50p per miniature. And with these 40 miniatures, I now have more than enough options to create 2 or 3 warbands for Force of Virtue. Coverage of that game will be landing on the channel in the next couple of weeks, but for now I thought we would take a closer look at these miniatures, just for a little change of pace. On the cover, we have a really nice illustration by Peter Dennis, who is one of the leading names in historical art for tabletop gaming. He does a huge amount of work with Osprey Publishing. If we look at the back of the box, in the top right it states these miniatures are the work of Michael Perry, and the box contains 40 infantry figures, 26 flags and unit bases. Do note, that's unit bases. These miniatures are intended to be based in ranks rather than individually. More on that in a moment. The back of the box also has some simple guidelines for assembling the miniatures, and thankfully there are some livery ideas, because that's something I can't say I know a lot about, so I do appreciate the help with coming up with paint schemes. And it says here that you can build a contingent of European soldiers made up of pikemen, crossbowmen and handgunners, including command, for Burgundy, Switzerland, France, Italy, the Holy Roman Empire and later 15th century Spain. That is perfect for Force of Virtue, as I need Italian and Swiss troops. In fact, the Force of Virtue starter set was developed with this box of miniatures in mind, so it's a perfect starting point. Let's take a look inside. You get a 4-page leaflet packed with information. Ideally, as someone with no real experience gaming in this time period, I would have liked even more information, but beggars can't be choosers. And there is this fancy thing called the internet, so I'm not too worried. There's a paragraph here for each of the countries I previously mentioned, with some useful information regarding their force compositions, who they allied with, and what their specialities were. On the back, we have some hints and tips for how to put the miniatures together. They are pretty straightforward, except if you want to change the pikes to halberds, in which case you need to do some snipping and gluing. Fortunately, the instructions do tell you how long your halberd should be in millimeters in order to be historically accurate. We also get some information on the pavis, the large shield that crossbowmen would use, with some different designs to inspire your painting. Finally, inside the leaflet we have 26 different banners, a selection from all of the countries. You can cut these out and glue them on banner poles if you want to, the paper quality is pretty decent, or you could photocopy them or even use them as a painting guide to freehand your own flags. Again, it's very useful to have some guidance for historical accuracy, especially for this time period, regarding which I am something of a dunce. Moving on, this box contains one frame of unit bases. These are the green rectangular bases from Renedra, intended for forming your miniatures up in ranks. So I'm not going to be using those. I will keep them though, they are going to go into my bits box. You never really know when you might need a flat section of plastic to build up a scenic base, to fill a recess under a base so you can install magnets that sit flush, or for making tokens or objective markers. You can even use them as a surface for practicing your freehand painting skills. Paint little pictures on them and then hang them on the walls inside your dungeons and other buildings. But I will be using round Renedra bases. These do not come in the box, but I have a bunch of them that I keep handy. I tend to use them for making tokens, but just recently I used them for basing up the lovely pewter miniatures from City of Chaos. These are 25mm rounds, which is perfect for what I want. Then we have 5 frames of miniatures in 2 different styles. There are 3 of these large frames. Each frame has 12 bodies and 12 heads, so obviously each frame is going to build up to 12 miniatures, but you get a lot of different options for customization across the 2 different types of sprue in the box, and by mixing and matching heads and arms you can ensure that no 2 models look the same. In terms of weapons, each frame gives you 6 pikes, 4 crossbows and 4 arquebuses, plus a selection of bucklers. That does mean, of course, it's impossible to make all of the miniatures in the box with the same weapon loadout. For example, you couldn't make 40 pikemen. That's something to bear in mind when you are figuring out which boxes of these you might need and in what quantities for your historical wargame of choice. These sculpts themselves are really good, lots of great detail. It is worth noting they are 28mm and they are a little on the small side. I do believe later Perry miniatures ranges are ever so slightly larger. Honestly, I find miniature scales these days are a bit all over the place. We will do some size comparisons a bit later in the video so you can see how the size of these miniatures compares to the size of other popular ranges. Look at these faces though, all different, all packed with character, and most importantly of all wearing their flipping helmets. All of the weapons are equally detailed, and I like that there is a mix of firing and loading options for the crossbows and arquebuses. Like I said, there are 3 of those frames which is going to build a total of 36 miniatures, but then you also get 2 smaller sprues like this one. Each of these frames has 2 more bodies which gets you up to your 40 total miniatures, and they have all the custom options for command units. There is a drum and a variety of extra weapons. Additionally, you get 6 shields on each frame for your crossbows, plus a variety of sidearms and alternative polearm tops. Another 11 heads with some more flamboyant feathers on display give you even more customization options. I love this one. It reminds me of the old Dark Company miniatures from HeroQuest and the classic Empire units of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, for obvious reasons. And again, we have lovely detailing and variety. If you're used to working with something like Games Workshop scale miniatures, these miniatures are more true scale, so everything feels a bit more dinky. The double-handed sword would seem very frail and insignificant compared to the ridiculous blades your Age of Sigmar heroes whirl around. But that's your lot for this box. The next step is I need to figure out what miniatures I need for my Force of Virtue warbands, and then I can start building them. In fact, let's jump cut into the future. So I've quickly put together 2 capos for my Italian force. I had this idea of a group of veteran mercenaries led by a brutal knight who likes to get into the thick of things and crush skulls with his mace, while his brother and loyal banner bearer hangs back to pass out the orders. To that end, I put them both in advancing poses. I also made them both well armoured, assuming that after many successful missions they had been able to accumulate the wealth and supplies to be well prepared for any serious encounter. I've done a really quick paint job on them, just a few colours, lead belcher mainly, with Xandri dust and dryad bark for all the wood, with washes of Nuln oil and Agrax earthshade. Really just enough to get them ready for the tabletop in a couple of hours. The banner is just a photocopy and print of one of the designs from the Mercenaries box. I used a pencil to curl the banner and create the wave to simulate it flapping in the wind. For a moment, I got very nostalgic for doing that with all my old Warhammer Fantasy Battle armies 30 years ago. You can see these miniatures do look rather small on those 25mm rounds, and when we compare them to some other miniature ranges, they are somewhat diminutive. Here they are hanging out with a Skyrim Dragonborn from Modiphius, a knight from the excellent skirmish game Anima Tactics, my Old Hammer Knight from Advanced HeroQuest, a Metal Wizard from Reaper, a Goblin from the Lord of the Rings miniatures game, and a Wizard from Dungeons & Dragons. From this lot, only the D&D and Lord of the Rings miniatures are closely comparable, with the closest, unsurprisingly, being the Goblin. As we've already discussed, the Perrys were heavily involved with the Lord of the Rings game, and that game is 28mm and basically true scale rather than heroic. But there we have it. I have some more mercenaries to build for Force of Virtue, so I will be getting on with that next. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.